Our lineup today includes three fantastic speakers. Firstly, Daniël DETHIER, who is at the EU Blockchain Partnership, and he will talk to us about the sovereign identity framework in the context of the EU region. Our second speaker is Mr. Gérard DETHIER, who is a partner and CTO of Sustainable Base Finance, and he will tell us more on how we can acquire back control on the data we give out, sometimes unconsciously, especially in the context of open source software. And our third speaker is Frédéric LEBEAU, the co-founder of Datavillage. He will tell us more about our digital twins. So far, most of us, including me, did not know that we had twins, but now he will tell us how we can create our twins. After the talks will last for around 15 minutes each. Then we would try to take some questions from the floor. You can use the chat box for that, or if you want, you can even talk to us and by your PC. And then at the end of all the three presentations, we are going to have a more general Q&A session, which will be chaired by Mr. Yves Collinet, Managing Director of Micropole Consulting, Belgium. So I wish you all a very nice and informative meetup. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Happy to be here, and also very happy also to do a session in my own country, because I'm more abroad than in Belgium itself, and very happy to be virtually in Liège. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my presentation. Okay, I hope everybody sees my screen and the presentation. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to talk about the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework, where I'm the convener of. I work at Digipolis. Digipolis is the local IT provider for the city of Ghent and Antwerp. But in my role, I work in the European Blockchain Partnership. That is a public service helping, but I will introduce that in a moment. I will not only talk about what is on the European level, but also a bit on the general identity aspect. So why is self-sovereign identity necessary and also needed? So let me start with first the code. And the code comes from a famous inspirational speaker on finance and identity, David Birch. And he states, and that is also a bit the motive of the presentation, we cannot build services for the post-industrial age, that's the age that we are currently in, using the identity infrastructure of the industrial age. We clearly mentioned a new digital identity infrastructure. Because if you look at the processes that we use in identity, and you need to see identity as a very broad, not only identification, we use mainly automatic paper processes. We still use the cards, we still use the papers to identify us and do the processes. But he clearly states that we need a new identity form infrastructure. And why doesn't it is currently useful? So what are the limitations of that identity solution that we use today? And if we look at it, we see that mainly our data is elaborated a bit or treated in this way. I like to use this picture because it clearly shows that your data, you're not the owner of it. It's guarded by other people that you can not even have access to your data in a safe way. Most governments, banks, in the best way, of course, is secure, have protected your data, but you cannot easily access your data. That is in the current centralized solution that we have is a problem, that you don't have real access to your data. Most governments, most public organizations, but also private organizations, try to solve that by providing multiple portals. You have in Belgium, MyFin, My Pension, My this, all those kind of things. Very interesting, but they only show static information. You can go past the cards in the same picture, the one below, but you cannot reuse that information. It's trapped in that portal. And you have that many portals, that many organizations, that you have also your fragmented information. So even those kind of solutions that they provide with all the goodwill are not a real solution for the problems that we have. Yeah? Some governments, some organizations also try to link different sources. You have different crossroad databases with link authentic sources, so your diploma database with your financial database. It's mostly point-to-point solution. And even if you use crossroad database, the immense complex. Yes, in Belgium we had, and also in the French-speaking side and the French-speaking side, we are currently working on this, but at the pace it will take another 100 years before every potential source is linked by another. So that's also not a solution what we have with the current industrial age solution. Also, we see a big movement currently in my data, but storing data in a vault is not the only solution that we need to go. Yeah? How do you prove that your data that you store in your own vault, that you can have access it from those different portals, is really the data that is trustworthy, that you don't have tamper it or have changed it to claim that you are a doctor and you're not, or you had a certain diploma that maybe you don't have. So you need to have those data vaults, need to have also trust in it. And of course, I think also the speakers will, next speakers will be also guiding it. How can we share in a discreet way information? We can also say to the bank, go to the government to check that information. But also my government will know, now, okay, you have been to that bank has instructed you, you have instructed the bank to check information. So, but in some cases, you don't want to share information so that the source knows that you have done. Yeah, when you're going to apply for a job, you don't know in all cases want to have your former work or your future work in relation with each other. Yeah, you want to share that information about your identity in a discreet way. As already mentioned, we don't have a clear and easy way to share digital information. How can we trust something that is not from our sector, that is not from our country? So I have different difficulties to share and trust the documentation. All those paper stamps that we place in other contexts, they are not trusted. And of course, we share too much information. We have the paper which included, and that's the kind of information that we share. We're trying to prove something, but it contains much more information that the actual user or issuer or lying party needs to know. So that is a payslip that I show. It contains more information. So maybe those kind of information, what I want to prove is that, okay, I have a job is paid, but they don't know, they need to know how my taxes are paying, how much days of vacation I have to, and so on and so on. We see, of course, current solutions being emerged. In Sweden, we see Bank ID, much closer, we see it's me. But those kind of solutions, identity solutions, all of which, of course, based or limited to identification. So we need to provide, your identity consists of many more aspects that you want to manage. It's not about just authenticate yourself, it's also by providing all these other aspects. And of course, the biggest problem that you have seen in the GDPR implementation is about accepting cookies. But how do you treat or have the consent stored in a way that you really control it? I have given certain site consent, but I have no proof for itself, or I have no the ability to change that or revoke that consent. So you have also the difficulties because it's much centralized that you as a user don't have the possibility to control your consent. And of course, what is also needed, we as people have many identities. We have private identity, we have public identities, but we are now forced to manage them in many different solutions, many different aspects. So you, in certain cases, even in the public sector, you could have multiple national identities and you have no way to correlate those to each other. A Dutch student coming here in Belgium gets a new Belgium EID, temporary ID. His diplomas are attached to that ID. He goes back to the Netherlands, try to prove with his Dutch identity his Belgium diploma, and they are not connected. He cannot prove that he, as a Dutch student, is the same people that has earned a diploma. So we have faced with all those multiple identities, you get issues where he cannot correlate or cannot manage them together. Those aspects, and just briefly, of course, the limitations and the restrictions that we have in decentralized manner has emerged, and I think that will be the focus of this meetup, that you need another concept. And decentralization is the new concept that has, as also in the self-sovereign identity, been elaborated. One famous guy in that field is, of course, Christopher Allen. So if you're a bit familiar with the concept, you'll have encountered certainly his name and also his statement on this. And he claims that self-sovereign identity is the next step beyond user-centric identity. We are seeing a lot of solutions are user-centric, but you need to go back another step. And that is putting really the user central to the administration of identity. It's going beyond user-centricity. And that is what he wants to achieve. He's written that statement a few years ago, but it's taking more and more uptake. Because the model and we see that there's a bit the model of SSI, the model he proposed is extremely simple and easy, but it has a lot of power. Yeah, you put the citizen in control, in center, and he will, from his data source or a wallet or whatever you want, the entity hub you want to call it, he controls the interaction with different players. Yeah? In the simple case, you have a university, he gives the citizen a credential he can store, and that credential, the citizen at a certain moment can present that credential to the employer. Yeah? Now, to make that, of course, something that is trustworthy, you need also a decentralized source so that you can anchor that kind of thing. Yeah? So that the employer knows, I receive here a diploma. Is it issued by a university? Has it not been tampered? And therefore, you need a ledger or a blockchain aspect to also give you that information. Yeah? So without the employer checking with the university and checking these things, is this really his diploma and so on, you get a very simple thing. Yeah? And the employer and university don't have any, they can easily check information, but with the citizen in control. Oops. And you can have stored many information in the model, because to give you another example, was already referring, the citizen that wants to apply for a job abroad, he needs a lot of information that he needs to share with that future employer. It's by this base identity. And you can have multiple penal records, diplomas, reference, page slip, bank accounts, medical condition, travel appointment, family status. In the normal world that we have today is all paperwork. And the future employer needs always to control, okay, I get the paper, is that trustworthy? Is that the right thing? No? If you have a means to easily check that information online in a digital, decentralized way, the trustworthy way, it can be improving the processes a lot and simplify a lot of interaction, but with the control of the employer or the citizen. He gives the clear indication you can check that information. What are, of course, from that model, also very interesting aspects from SSI? You don't have a unique identifier that correlates all your transactions. You can claim, okay, let's do all those things with EID, but all potential interaction that you do are also linked, okay, that's that person, so I could potentially correlate all the transaction. In this model, not. Yeah? You have decentralized identifiers that you can change as many as you want, and you cannot say, okay, those kind of things are all the same people. Yeah? You have interaction that are limited to that interaction, and nobody needs to know your national security number. That's not necessary that they store that. They need to store that credential is right or not. Yeah? So no centralization of personal transaction. So no data hub of honeypot of personal information. You have no access to personal data stores. without the consent of the citizens, and also no risk to share too much information. You only share the credentials that are needed, not too many, but just the amount that you need. Now, why? So that concept is emerging in the European market or in the global market with different vendors, solution providers, different industries, citizens, startups looking at that. But why do we need a European self-identity framework? This is part of what has emerged as the European blockchain service infrastructure, and that's an infrastructure where public administrations want to collaborate with each other. Because as Europe with its many member states, a centralized solution where they store all this information in the European institution is not doable. Every country is independent. Every country stores its information. So they don't want a big centralized solution. They want something that they can control together. So blockchain and decentralized aspect is something that European public administration are looking for. Bulgaria doesn't want that Germany controls its data, but they need to share those kind of things. And what is that EPSI infrastructure? Is, as I mentioned, the blockchain infrastructure for cross-border public services. That's going to be a network, now including different nodes, that can be collaborating on each other and have that. And the Commission is really pushing that to see how we can improve those kind of things. It's not only building infrastructure, it was also looked at, okay, how can we support the real use cases? And the use cases that we have is monetization of documents, the diploma management, how can we have educational credentials, there's the data sharing on taxation, and of course the European self-sovereign identity. And what is the added value? That is the same aspect, the added value that we do in that European self-sovereign identity is want to see how can we involve in that easy model, to see how we can interact or get governments involved. Many governments have the information about citizens, have the authentic sources, so we need to include them as issuing party. We need to also set links with GDPR, links and respect to GDPR and the eIDAS, provide the necessary base identities, and also see that we have simplified processes. And of course, what we also see is how you can preserve European democratic values in all that aspect. Because it's important. We see approaches in the United States, we see approaches in China, which are not the things that we would like to see with the data that now is currently being managed for European citizens. So we want also to differentiate that kind of thing. So what we are doing is building a lot of specification. I'm not going into the details, but there you see, okay, we want to specify what a relying party environment would look like and what are components necessary. We also produce a lot of legal information. We have reports on the link between SSI and the eIDAS world. What is the link between SSI and GDPR? So those are the things that are also examined by the experts that we are engaging in this project. Of course, we follow a lot of standards or some emerging standards that we now see. Because we need to be, of course, interoperable with all those aspects. What is our planning? We are now working on version 2 of our project, our framework. In the next weeks, we're gonna deploy the first services, and then in the beginning next year, the first member states pilots will be starting and going into production or later on the production. So that's a bit the framework. So if you are interested in what we are doing, we try to publish as much as possible. We need to be open so that other marketplaces can interact with us and try to build that entire ecosystem. Because mentioning we are just a part in the ecosystem, so we need to see how this combines with other things. And I want to close with my last slide, a bit also a citation of President von der Leyen. This is also into the more attention or the bigger attention that, of course, personal data has in the European governance and the political level. She also mentioned that the Commission need to have more attention to secure European e-identity, where the user controls it. So in the next year, Europe will be looking at what are the best models to have that new decentralized, new approach of identity. Yeah? It's not sure that SSI will be, or decentralized identity will be the main driver, but at least at this moment, they will be heavily inspired by concepts, projects that we have elaborated in this brief introduction. Yeah? So that is something that Europe will be focusing on. Data sovereignty, empowerment of citizens will be something that Europe, together with the member states, will be more driving to, and is also important that we in Belgium understand what is happening and see possibilities to have that other approach. That was my brief presentation. I hope I was a bit in time. I don't know if I'm going to stop sharing. Moment.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. You were perfectly on time.
Thank you.
Ashwin, I think it's question time now.
Yes, it's indeed question time. If we have questions from the floor, we can take them now. We already see a couple of questions appearing in the chat box. Maybe I should ask the question so that everyone can hear them properly. So first, Colin is asking, what are your counterparts in Belgium? That's the first question. And the second one is from Frédéric, who asked that he's asking how citizens have the maturity to manage their own wallet, which means that are we mature enough or responsible enough to take care of our data by ourselves? How do we ensure how we keep our data private, and our mechanism to restore data available already? So these are the questions from the floor.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to answer the first one. So my counterparts, now we are mainly looking at public administration. So that means that the Ministry of Interior, the people of BOSA, who are now digital transformation, so the verdict of things. Also, on the educational part, we are looking at speaking with the Ministry of Education in Flanders, but of course, in the ARES, or the French-speaking side, are the parties. So it's mainly now governments who want to issue those credentials. No? But of course, we need to see how the other market players are interacting. So we have a few firms also interested to see how can they interact with EPSI. No? So in Belgium, we see a few things. Not as that much active as I would like to see it. In other countries, we are seeing more progress, but there are opportunities also for startups to interact with those kind of things. Just to mention, next year in Europe, there will be also more funding, more research money to also implement those kind of things. And of course, the question of Frédéric is very pertinent on the maturity. It is a big responsibility that you give citizens. They are now responsible of the interaction. No? You have done the first social and a bit economic research on this. People are willing to that, but you need to educate those people and also a bit protect those people, because you give them a lot of power. And what is the thing, the danger that you have, that somebody gives you €5 and you give access to all the information. And that is something that we need to protect. We are not sure what the answer is, but it's not something that you need to go lightly with those kind of things. I don't know, I want to take that next question also.
Yes, we have one from Eve as well. So he asking whether we would like to implement this across Europe.
Our focus is cross-border. So it's in European cases, and the cases that we attract is things to see are on a European level. Of course, that's a big complexity. You need to see that you need to align 28 member states on this. So it will be going with early adopters and followers. That will not be an easy job. And of course, we need to also see this on to extra complexity, also look at the global thing. We are now also talking with Canada and Australia, how that interaction will be on that level. So it's a long process to say it. It's challenging and interesting, but yeah, it will take some time to implement it.
Yeah. Very good. And as you said, I think the main issue, one of the main issues is the issue of maturity. And as you said it, indirectly, with much power comes much responsibility. So if
Indeed.
we are in power of our data, then we are responsible to properly manage it. And that's a central pillar of all blockchain-based technologies, right? Trust is
decentralization comes with responsibility, indeed. Right. But so I think we have citizens that are also, that's our democratic value. We need, of course, to trust those citizens. You've had states that doesn't trust it, more philosophically, but you need to see how it's treated.
Perfect. Thank you again, Daniel.
Thank you.
We would now welcome our second speaker, Gérard, who will tell us how we can get back control over the data we give to many of these cloud providers, especially. Gérard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I will be talking about a little bit different data, probably. So taking back control on your data, of course. Which kind of data? Well, maybe not the kind of data that Daniel just introduced, so maybe not as critical data. Here, I will be more talking about, well, day-to-day data, I would say. The data we are producing, we are consuming every day, we are sharing with our friends. Data which are actually telling a lot about us. And sometimes we are even not aware of the fact that they have value for some other actors, and sometimes we are a little bit careless in the way we are sharing them. So when I say take back control on your data, it's about, okay, being aware about what we're doing with our data and how we are actually sharing them without sometimes knowing we are doing that. So most of us probably have a Gmail address or are storing files in a OneDrive or in a Google Drive or in an iCloud Drive or whatever. And well, we are happy that those data are safe in some way where they are, but are we actually sure that we still have control on them? Where are those data actually stored? Who is actually doing something with them? And the thing is that we are using all those services provided by big tech companies. We are using them mostly because it's free. But the problem is that generally when it's free, then that means that you're probably the product. And as I mentioned, that being said, is that, well, the cloud is quite handy. It's a brilliant tool when you need to share information. It's brilliant in the sense that, well, we have data on our computer, we are storing them in the cloud, our computer breaks down, no problem, we still have them available. So that, from that point of view, it's a great stuff. And also there is that availability stuff. Okay, I have data on my computer, I'm storing them in my cloud. Actually, I have access to them also on my phone. I may even share those data with someone else quite easily. So are all cloud providers evil? Of course not. There are solutions which exist, with private life, I would say friendly solutions which exist. One example is the French provider, which is called Framasoft. You probably already heard about it, which is actually providing a lot of services on their own platform. They are providing replacements for Google Docs, for Doodle, for Google Calendar, etc., etc. But in that case, we are still, well, using them is always better than actually sending all our data to some company like Facebook. But we are still dependent on another third party. And there are several, well, actually issues with that. First, how do you handle the fact that that third party may become unavailable at some point? Second, well, the party which is trustable on one day is not necessarily still trustable the day after. And of course, the third element is, okay, you may not be happy actually with the quality of service which is provided with existing services. So in that case, well, several solutions, but one of them is probably do it yourself. So create your own cloud. This, of course, has a cost, but independency does not come for free. We were talking about taking responsibilities. Well, that's one of the costs. You will have to manage your own infrastructure. So that means that you will have to have at least one public IP address. So an IP address, for those who do not know, it's basically the address of a server. So that's how a server is identified on the internet. You will need to handle your DNS zone. So you will have basically to order the domain name and manage it. You will have to manage your SSL certificates if you want, and I clearly advise it if you want to encrypt your information and protect your data. You will need, of course, one or several servers, and you will have to manage your own software stack. So given the kind of solution you are choosing in order to manage your own infrastructure, this is more or less complex to handle. Okay, you may actually find providers which will manage almost everything for you, and which becomes quite easy. That being said, again, you are then giving back some of the control you are just trying to gain. All right. So this slide, it's not about it's not trying to freak you out. It's just showing that there are several elements that you need to think about when you are well, trying to build your own cloud. So let's focus a bit about cloud services. So cloud services, basically the first question is, where should I start? We are most of the time using many different cloud services. And actually, all cloud services are not that easy to replace. I will come back to that later, in the sense that they are sometimes very, very complex and complete, and it's not always possible to replace one single service by one single solution, right? That's one thing. And the other thing is also that all the data we are storing in the cloud, well, they do not have the same requirements in terms of confidentiality and integrity. For instance, well, I'm storing some music in the cloud. That's just to share some music between my several devices. Well, if at some point I lose that information, maybe it's not a big deal, actually. On the other hand, if I have a certified and digitally signed document that I need to actually, well, make sure that I am able to share it at any time in the near future, well, that kind of document must be stored and protected. So that was about the data themselves. I was talking about the fact that cloud services are sometimes not that easy to replace, but basically, in order to make that possible, the first thing you need to do is to target functionalities and not the services themselves. So basically, you should not think about, okay, I want to replace Google Calendar. Well, you may start that way, but it's preferable to rather say, okay, I have Google Calendar on that side. Actually, I'm using it to share calendars. So the functionality I'm trying to replace is sharing calendars. What are the alternatives for that? I'm using Dropbox, for instance, for the moment. I'm using it to share files and synchronize. Okay, what I'm trying to replace is not necessarily Dropbox itself. What I'm trying to find is an alternative, is a solution to actually be able to share my files and synchronize them. Okay, and again, Slack, for instance, do not say Slack. Well, I want actually to find a solution to implement instant messaging, but in a way that I control it. Same stuff for Skype. I'm trying to do video conferencing, but using a tool that I'm actually self-hosting, etc., and so forth. One advice when you are starting your journey in replacing all the cloud services you are using for the moment, it's, well, try to proceed step by step. You do not have to replace everything at once, right? So here it's just an example. That's more or less the journey we took at Sustainable-Based Finance. We first decided to, well, take full control on our files, our calendars, and stuff like that. After that, we found out that we were actually still sharing a lot of information through instant messaging. So, okay, we focused a bit on that. After that, video conferencing, of course, and then, well, at some point we realized that we were using sometimes polls and forms, and that kind of stuff could have been internalized as well. Of course, there are many next steps, but here it's just a few of them that I showed as an example. Free and open source solutions exist. So I was talking about file sharing, sharing calendars, shared calendars, sorry, shared contact solutions, web-based posts, etc. There is something which is called Nextcloud. You maybe already heard about, which is a great tool that you can easily install on your own server. And basically with that, you are already replacing a lot of third-party services you would be using for the moment. For the instant messaging, group messaging, etc., a good replacement for Slack is Mattermost. And finally, for video conferencing, there is Jitsi. Of course, I'm not talking about all the possible solutions. Those are examples. But the message here is to say that, okay, each time you want to replace a functionality, there is probably a free and open source alternative existing out in the wild. One kind of service which is very difficult to replace is emails. It is difficult in the sense that emails are actually a very, well, it's a critical tool in the context of a company. So you need high availability, so it's not acceptable that someday someone is not able to send you an email because your box is full. If you were sending and receiving emails a couple of years ago, that's the kind of messages you still got, but that's the kind of stuff we somehow forgot about. And I'm not sure as a company that we would consider consider that as acceptable. Also, losing the data that we are actually exchanging in our emails would be very, well, terrible, would have terrible consequences for our company. And also, there is all the spam issues that are not necessarily easy to handle if you are self-hosting your own email services. I mean, in the sense that the messages that you are sending may be flagged as spam by others. It's not always easy to detect why this is happening. That being said, regarding emails, you do not have necessarily to use Google or Microsoft, to name a few, to actually host your whole emails system. Generally, if you are already buying a domain name for your company or for yourself, you have some email services which are provided. They are generally decent in many aspects. You may argue that the webmail interfaces are not that ergonomic, which is generally true. That being said, do not forget that you can still use your email clients. And one interesting tool also is Nextcloud, again, providing some nice application which provides an alternative to the webmail of your domain provider. So we talked, well, I talked a lot about online services. Well, what about what's happening on your own computer or your own phone, right? So it's nice stuff to actually get rid of the big tech services. But is your computer actually well ready to take that step? We are used to use a lot of tools we sometimes tend to consider as standard. For instance, most of the time you are saying, okay, I've seen many people actually saying, okay, I need Windows on my computer. Well, did they actually need Windows? No, they actually needed an operating system. So the thing is that many companies are pushing their own tools, saying, okay, this is standard. Actually, there is nothing else in the world. It's almost a message sometimes. So you have Windows, that's one example. You have Microsoft Office. Okay, who is actually sending something else than a Word document when collaborating? There is also that browser war, which is more or less well, which has a big winner for the moment, which is Google Chrome. We see a little bit everywhere. You have even some applications which are telling you, okay, install Chrome, it's working better on that. Is that actually acceptable to have one single tool provided by one company becoming a kind of must use when you want to have access to some website or service? All right. So this is actually all about talking about de facto and real standards, right? So de facto standards are somehow those standards which were imposed by companies, which actually pushed their tools so much and so good that everybody is using them. Is it a real standard? Well, not exactly, right? You have to use it because everybody is using it. That does not make it standard. On the other hand, you have the real standards, which are actually approved by official standard setting bodies like ISO and other bodies like that. But of course, so my message here is try to prefer, well, not try, prefer real standards over de facto standards, but keep in mind that this may have an impact on the software stack you are using on your side, right? Again, as I was talking about the services, when you are trying to replace a software, do not always think about the software itself, think more about the functionalities you are trying to replace. So for instance, when you are trying to replace Windows or Mac OS X or Android, think about operating systems. When you are talking about Edge, Safari, Chrome, okay, you are talking about a browser. Windows Mail, Apple Mail, you are talking about mail client, etc., etc. Again, the examples are plenty. So here, some alternatives. Instead of installing Windows on your computer, you may install, for instance, Ubuntu or another Linux distribution, right? There are plenty of them. Instead of using always Chrome or Edge or whatever the browser which is actually provided with your operating system, maybe you could try Firefox or Opera. Instead of having to use Android, why not? Well, you can actually use Android versions which are not tied to Google services. It exists. So there is a nice project with that, for that, which is the eFoundation. You can have a look. In terms of mail clients, you may replace the clients that are provided with the operating system by Thunderbird. And at last, but not at least, if you are using Microsoft Office and want to actually, well, use real standards, why not switch to LibreOffice, for instance, which is actually, well, working with real standards provided, which were conceived by the Document Foundation. So, and this ends my presentation on taking back control on your data. Do you have questions?
Maybe then I can ask you a very small question before we just proceed to the next speaker. You rightly pointed out that we should start to think not in terms of names of tools, but rather on the applications that we want to have. So instead of thinking about Chrome, think that we need a browser, for instance. But such kind of mindset is usually not the mindset of a lay person, right? most people who are not well versed in technology would not think that I can use Ubuntu to replace Microsoft Windows, for instance. So what you said is very interesting and very inspiring, but maybe you can explain a bit more on the constraints that surround your message.
Well, I think that part of the problem is it's a little bit, as we actually found out at the end of the presentation of Daniel, but there is a kind of problem of education. Basically, well, who knows what an operating system is? Who knows exactly that it's using a word processor? Most people are talking about Word. If you say, okay, are you using a word processor? They are looking at you and saying, huh? No, I'm not using word processor, I'm using Word. No, actually there is a problem of education somehow. In my opinion, if people become aware of what they are using, what they need, it's quite surprising the speed with which they are actually willing to change. So it happens that I have to help some people out with the computer because they are coming to me and saying, "Hey, you are a computer scientist. Can you can you fix my computer?" And sometimes I say yes. And the thing is that most of the time you just talk with them and ask them, okay, do you really need Windows? Is it a problem if I replace it with something else? Do you really need Word? What do you really need to do? Okay, the only thing I do actually is going on the internet. I'm only looking on videos in YouTube and stuff like that. Okay, right, then why not switch? And actually they do.
All right, yeah, so education is the key. All right, thank you very much for that again.
Welcome.
Now I see one question which just popped up, but we'll leave it to the panel discussion at the end. But for now on, we have the pleasure of welcoming our next speaker, Frédéric LEBEAU, who will talk to us about our digital twins. I'm very much looking forward to see how my twins looks like, and I think most of us are also very enthusiastic to have a look at their twins. Frédéric, the floor is yours.
So good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about Datavillage and what we do with Datavillage. So we are a Belgian startup, started more than 2 years ago, and I'm Frédéric, one of the 2 co-founders. After multiple pivots, so we came with a mission with Datavillage to unlock the value of personal data according to 3 main values. So according to user control, privacy, and transparency. So if you look about what's happening with data today, and we already talked a bit about that, most of us use digital devices every day, which means that every day we create a stream, and it's really a stream of online activities, and these are our data. And this is an ever-growing database of personal information that determines our online behavior. And if we look about the model today, this is wrong. So the data is locked and the market is closed, meaning that the market pushed the organization to collect more and more data and more personal data. And this data is spread and duplicated, making it impossible for people to keep control over that data. So we have multiple figures about that from surveys and from the internet. So based on these surveys, 91% of people feel like they've lost their privacy and control online, and 36% feel they have no choice about how apps use their data. And we have been working on this topic over the past 2 years, and nowadays, yeah, there is no single day without something related to personal data control and privacy, like announcement from government and regulation, like the last proposal from the European Commission about the Digital Service Act, or also the issue with the way GAF has grabbed our data, or multiple scandals about the use of our personal data. But there is a good news, and this is about a paradigm shift which is underway. So a paradigm shift that puts user at the center of the equation and gives them back control over their personal data, allowing consumers to switch from one service to another and pushing the organizations not in the race to collect more and more personal data, but to focus on their products and services. So in this new world, there are new digital actors, obviously technologies and solutions. We already talked a bit about that. So we have classified these actors into three main categories. The ones that are working on decentralized identity, like explained by Daniel in the first pitch, giving back control of identity to the citizen and all static data related to your identity. There is also the personal data store, or PDS, giving the opportunity to people to store their personal data and manage access to it. And the last one is about personal data exchange, still in early stage, but it's about platforms that are giving the opportunity to exchange data in a trusted way, in a transparent way, and sometimes even to monetize that data. So coming back on the personal data store, there is one that we strongly believe in. So this is SEUIL, created by Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. So we are working with them from day one, I mean. And the main concept of SEUIL is to separate application and storage. So it's really a paradigm shift, meaning that people choose where they want to store their personal data, the personal data they generate, like any kind of personal data, like your Facebook post or likes or bank statement or sports activities and so forth. So they can then grant access in a very granular way to multiple applications. And personal data is organized according to the concept of linked data, which means that the data, and this is really interesting, the data is linked together. So SEUIL also brings the concept of Web ID. It's a unique identifier that you own, manage, and you can use over the web. And of course, there are multiple challenges to overcome, and I will come back later on that one. But SEUIL is really building the right tool, according to us, and the right protocol to support that shift. But there is another thing. And it's a concern about using that data and the interest from organizations to use that data, and especially when it comes to hyper-personalization, augmented experience, surveys, insights, etc. So just have a look at the economic model of big players like Google, Facebook. Also, this model is also called the behavioral surplus. The strategy is clear. So, I mean, they get personal data to generate a personalized product and to trigger addiction to this product. And that's most probably why we are using this product. It's not especially about, you know, the technology behind, etc. It's more about the fact that these products are really smart. And they are smart because they are based on personal data and they are fully personalized. Their goal is to obtain more and more data to generate what we call a surplus, like your consumer profile. And once they have this consumer profile, they sell it in a very lucrative advertising market. And it's a closed market without transparency and a very, very limited user control. And that's where we come with Datavillage. So imagine a shift in which you could get a view and control of all of your data, the digital twin, your digital twin. Imagine also that as an organization, and especially as a local organization, you could just pick and choose these data and extract insights or behavior without the burden of managing that data, with full privacy, transparency, and in respect of your consumer. And we make it a reality. So how does that work concretely? Our product is made of two main elements. On one side, data passport, where users control their data and bring it into existing digital journeys. Service providers integrate this passport in user experience in order to get consent and access to personal data. Then the service provider can use our personal AI data cage, which is a confidential computing environment, to perform AI data enrichment and matchmaking between their product or services and any kind of personal data. Then the organizations integrate the output, so the derived data, not the raw data, only the derived data, into their existing experience to provide personalized services. We have multiple examples, so I will take a few minutes to share with you a small demo, and I will use that one, so the one related to media industry. So this experience starts from the broadcaster streaming platform, and to get experience personalized, the user starts the data passport wizard. So the first step is tooling your personal data store. SEUIL in that case can be any kind of personal data store. The second step, if not yet done, is about linking your data to your personal data store, in that case, Spotify. And the third step is to acknowledge the consent for a specific purpose and for a specific duration. Then the user come back on the initial experience, which is now fully personalized. So from in that case, from Spotify data. So what's really powerful is once the same user connects on another streaming platform and do exactly the same to get also a personalized experience. So from the organization perspective, each organization connect to the Datavillage developer portal, create an app, and then can manage consent receipt. So the organization can provide any information related to GDPR attributes, but also select the data source, in that case Spotify, Facebook, and so forth, that can be used to provide hyper-personalized experience. Then once it's done, you have simply to integrate that data passport through a standard OpenID Connect, so through API, and then you can trigger the import of the personal data into your personal data store. So here's an example of Spotify data transformed into link data and stored into your personal data store. Then through API, you can load that data into the personal data cage, apply through same API enrichment like interest or temporal enrichment. And here you can see what's happening in the data cage. So this is where we do matchmaking. So on the left side, these are the media from the streaming platform, and on the right side, your Spotify data, of course, enriched through NLP, and then we do matchmaking between these data to extract recos in that case that can be used into user experience. So coming back on the, sorry, yeah, here we are. So coming back now on the solution. So one of the key concepts of the solution is, and also a challenge, by the way, is the interoperability between all that data. So as I told you, we focus on behavioral data, and we organize it in a user-centric way. This means that each data is organized as an end-user action with the main attributes, what, when, where, with whom, and how. For example, following a band on Spotify results in a follow action. Buying a ticket to Disneyland results in a buy action, but also in a travel action. So then we link the data around the end user's online activities, and this makes the data fully interoperable and easy to understand for the end user. So once the data is transformed in this user-centric model, we store it in the personal data store. So through the passport and the consent system, user acknowledge the data, and the user acknowledge the use of the data, and the data then are loaded into the data cage. The client will load the product into the data cage next to the personal data. Out-of-the-box enrichment are applied, and the organization can then query the cage through GraphQL endpoint and so forth, and get only the derived data. And that's key. The organization will only access the derived data, not the raw data. So you keep in full control of your raw data, and of course you acknowledge the fact that you will share this derived data, this profile, and so forth. So from a technology point of view, we are using a set and a lot of different technology like link data, RDF, RML.io, Neo4j, knowledge graph, GrandStack, GraphQL, and also confidential computing, which is still emerging, but we see a lot of opportunity there in the context of the data cage and confidential processing. Another key aspect and key challenge is the governance. So we have already had multiple discussions with large organizations, and their main concern is about opening up what they call their data. Of course, it's not their data; it's the data from their consumers. So, from our point of view, we don't believe, in a full open market and all that stuff. We more believe in ecosystem approach with contributing participants. In this way, our data governance also includes data providers through the validation of the consent receipt. So we are also talking about a consent-driven governance. And the service providers then defines a consent receipt with a specific purpose, and the data providers can validate the purpose, and then the service provider can process that data. So all in all, very high level and more from an architectural point of view, we extend and we open, I would say, existing data hub from organizations, so to external ecosystem through their consumer to enable hyper-personalized services. Through some key concepts and principles like personal data store as personal data lake, zero knowledge, confidential processing, semantic modeling, consent-based token, derived data extraction. So we are not replacing everything, but we are really expanding what companies are putting in place today. So a lot of companies are working on these data hub, and to bring to the next level of their digital and data-driven transformation. So in terms of market focus, we are working today with different verticals. So in Earth, we are working on Earth and on wellness with mutuality. In mobility, we are working with the Walloon government on multimodal mobility for their agents, but also with the perspective to do it for the citizens. In finance, we are exploring opportunities around, PFM, emotional investment, fraud detection, using your location data. In media, yes, on cross-streaming platform recommendation with a known Belgian broadcaster, and on HR today is just about use case, but at this stage, there is a real opportunity as well there. And our vision is really to enable creation of ecosystem as a service through the consumer's data. And to end up, here is our team with Quentin, co-founder, Philippe, tech lead, Souvik, working on MLOps and data engineering, Alexander, working on legal aspect, obviously. And yeah, if I can share, we are looking for a full stack developer to extend the team. So if you are interested about this new word, do not hesitate to contact us. Voilà, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the presentation, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Frédéric, for your presentation. We already have a question from Yves Collinet, who asked if his data will be stored on the Datavillage platform. And if I may just add in to that question, because it's a follow-up question, what I would like to know is what kind of RDF technology do you use? Because you speak about linked data. So I suspect that at some point in time, you convert your raw data into RDF triples or into some other semantic or first order logic format. Maybe if you could just elaborate on those two questions. So what is, if our data will be stored on the Datavillage platform, and specifically what kind of semantic web language you are using? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So for the first question, it's a very good question, and it's one obviously of the key challenge related to this new word and all the things related to personal data store. So we don't want to become what we call a personal data store provider, but in a first stage, we imagine that we will be and we are a personal data store provider. What does that mean? It means that the personal data store will be managed by Datavillage, but under the control of the end user. And I did not get time to go too much into detail on the security and identity-based encryption and all that stuff. But we have a mechanism that makes sure that even Datavillage does not access the data and your personal data, even if it's hosted and processed on Datavillage. But there is one other thing which is key and key to understand, and this is why also we really like Solid, is that in the model of Solid, the personal data store, you can move from one personal data store provider to another. And that's I strongly believe that's the right model, meaning that if you're not happy with one provider, then you can move to another one. And this is something that is growing right now. You have Inrupt, which is the company on top of Solid that start to provide personal data store and enterprise personal data store. There is also a strong opportunity, obviously, for local organization. You can imagine that a mutuality becomes your Earth personal data store. A bank can be your bank data, personal data store, and so forth. That's it. And yeah, and then coming on the second question about RDF and semantic. So today we are yes, we are using RML.io. This is a mapper. So we have built our ETL on that technology. We are working with IMEC also, and we are doing transformation from raw data, JSON data, into RDF trippers. So that's what we do. And nowadays our base ontology is a known one, so it's schema.org, because it really fits the way we organize data, meaning according to life and life actions.
Thank you very much for these answers. And I just saw that we have 2 more questions that just popped up, but I propose that we keep those questions for the panel discussion to have a more streamlined debate just afterwards. So I would like to thank again all our 3 presenters for their very inspiring talk, in which I personally learned a lot. And now I would like to welcome our guest, Mr. Yves Collinet, who is going to lead the panel and the ensuing debate. Please remember to take into account the 2 questions that have just popped up, including 1 question from you yourself, Yves, so you won't forget that one, I guess.
Thank you. Do you hear me? It's okay?
Yes.
Okay. Just it's a first session in this meetup about this disruptive subject, but it's extremely interesting to see from a startup perspective, from a, let's say, a developer architect perspective, and from the European Commission perspective, that everybody is sharing the same type of concerns and ideas, let's say, at the moment from his own window, let's say. But really interesting to see that everybody is concerned about the role of the data in the economy and the world of today. I have a generic point perhaps to launch the discussion is how each of you, I mean here Daniel, Gérard, and Frédéric, see the future of the GAFA. How do you see that in what you are preparing and the vision for the future you have? How do you see them evolve their future? What is the future of these companies?
It's a good question. If I can start, I don't have obviously a crystal ball. I don't believe they will break. It's not for sure they will not break. But what I feel is that I think they are moving in the privacy also, and they have some kind of pressure also to move in that direction. So that's good to see. We can also see that they are looking about alternatives revenue, and not only advertising, which is good, because today this is the main revenue, at least for Facebook and Google, and they are looking for other revenue, meaning that they are most probably looking ahead and think that this is not the future. But what was important, and maybe to answer also one of the other question in here, is about the fact that at least from our side, what we hope is to have more a better balance between these GAFA and the local player. And from Datavillage perspective, we strongly believe that it has to come from data and the use of that data. And that's why we believe that we should rebalance a bit, the data they have, and bringing that data also to the local player.
Okay. Gérard, do you have any idea on that, or any vision, any ambition?
Well, I essentially share the same vision as Frédéric. Indeed, in the short term, the future is bright for them, of course, because they will continue doing what they are doing for the moment, and that's the way it is. But clearly there is a shift. I mean, they see that people are starting to think about something else and are getting educated. Again, we're not talking about that, but more and more people are aware of what's happening, and so they are clearly preparing for something else. well, when I see actors like Microsoft moving slowly but surely towards the open source initiative, for instance, I have some, well, that brings back some, well, that makes me happy, basically. So maybe that, I hope that those big companies will indeed, well, move to something better. But I'm also convinced that we must stay. We must, well, pay attention to what's happening, because they will always come with something new and saying, okay, look, we have something great for you, and this will be the next big stuff to steal against something or whatever. And on the fact of, okay, will the local actors actually, well, take some weight, some additional weight? I think I'm a little bit more pessimistic about that. Maybe, and I hope so, of course. But I personally think that the local actors need to become stronger and to provide better services, to be more efficient in order to somehow be competitive when compared to companies like Google or Facebook or whatever. So my opinion is more than, instead of waiting for Facebook or Google to become better, it's the local actor that needs to become more efficient, I would say.
Okay. Is Daniel still with us?
Yes, I am.
Hello. Did you see the question a little bit earlier in the?
But maybe if I can allow me to also mention something about how Europe. Do you hear me?
Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah. The concern that there is, of course, with that how GAFA is treating that way, it's of course the Wild West. Huh? So everything is allowed to store data. I see in Europe a paradigm shift there and there. No, the rules were very liberal and everybody could shape, but we need to see that certain political standpoints are now much tougher. So it will not come entirely from them that they say, okay, we're going to change and give us regulation. It will be also a hard way to say, okay, the playtime is over. Those are the new rules. And those are the things that will be regulated. So we need to enforce that. And it will be drastically, it will change their business model. I think also what Frédéric mentioned, they need to see that they need another revenue model than it's now. You have mentioned the book of data surveillance, of surveillance capitalism. That is their business model. You're not going to change that to say, okay, go for another thing, because their model will break. So you need more regulation, and you need, of course, alternatives. People need to convince that that's not allowed to have your storage there in that way treated. But of course, you have alternatives to do that. In the current situation, we don't have both. We don't have real good alternatives, and we don't have a good, strong legislation. And those things are changing. So I think that there will be, in the next year, I hope so, more personal opinion, but there will be a big change on this. And Europe can play a role in this.
Thank you. Coming back to the question to you earlier in the chat, did you see it from Joris Oudeboom?
Yes.
About
yeah. He had a bit answered in the presentation of Frédéric, of course. It is those kind of solutions, they are not aligned at this moment. We see them different. We have different approach, but we share the same philosophy. It's about empowering the things. And that technology will evolve, that there will be interoperabilities. In Solid, you have what we have called the identity hub, the data store. It will need to have linked with Solid. They will need also to have include verifiable credentials that are highly trustworthy. So I see a future where those kind of systems need to evolve and let the user decide on it. But we need, as governments, of course, public service, offer those kind of things. If at least share the decentralized ID, decentralized concept, then things will be getting interoperable. They are not today, but I see that a lot of researchers are working on those kind of things. Flanders, that has taken a big interest in Solid. Yeah, they will at a certain moment also need to interact with European things, and then those things will be solved out. But I don't know, Frédéric, what's your opinion on this?
Fully agree. Fully agree, and I'm sure all of this will converge. I mean, you know, the web ID from one hand to the SSC, all that things will converge. And looking about Solid, they are ready to it's ready to converge. So I mean, there is a lot of flexibility there. So yeah, it will converge for sure. Yeah.
About the question of Brace, I think it's for you, Frédéric. I imagine the question is about the other platform based on the blockchain, like Oasis Lab or like things like that. Did you analyze that? Why did you choose one option than the other one? Any detail on that? Can you share some? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we are doing on a regular basis. We are looking about the market and what's happening, and there is something new, not every day, but every week. So yes, and blockchain. Yeah, we've looked about blockchain. To be fully transparent, I'm not a big fan of blockchain. I mean, I strongly believe that blockchain can solve some stuff, but not all the things. And this is a bit, you know, the buzz about blockchain. I think now it's landing a bit. So we are seeing blockchain now a solution in a, I think, obvious way, meaning as a consent ledger. So this is where we see really the added value of blockchain in our solution. But today we are still managing that consent ledger in a standard way. We have also to manage, you know, as a startup, the value that we will get out of it, and the value today is, you know, all the things with the matchmaking and all that stuff. So, but on our roadmap and on our plan, yeah, we see blockchain as a tech enabler for the consent ledger, and obviously, at some point in time, the idea, of course, is to plug also on decentralized identity and all that stuff. We did some POC, I think, 1 year ago on Ion from Microsoft, etc. So yeah, obviously, yes.
Any other question from the audience? I had another one, but perhaps there are some from the other people. I had one about the addiction you mentioned in your presentation, Frédéric. From the consumers, you mentioned the addiction of the consumers to the GAFA platform.
Yeah.
Question is it feasible to reinvent that, or to change that, or to I don't know, to rebuild this addiction to a new paradigm like the one you're presenting? What do you see there?
That's the main challenge, and that's 1 year ago I've tried to go out of Google. Okay. And 2 months later, I came back to Google. And the main reason, if I can say, it's not about the fact that I'm not able, you know, to manage technology and even to set up, you know, things that are not easy to set up. And I can live with maybe a less smart interface. But the main things is about, you know, the things they do for you in their experience. Just look about your history in Google Chrome. Everything is locked and everything is automated. And then we come always to the data they collect and what they do with that data and your personal data to provide that smart product. That's the same with Google Map and all that stuff. So the question, are we able to do that? Again, from our point of view with Datavillage, yes, we are able to do that if we are able to improve our product, meaning the local player, with the same mindset, with the same data. And this is one of the key things we came up with our solution. We also strongly believe that it should not be one single actor and one closed market, like, you know, one size fits all or one winner. And that's why, you know, in the streaming, that's really interesting. Imagine that in the streaming, you can go from one platform to another, to another, to another. Then most probably you get a lot of opportunities next to Netflix. and you get also that personalization across platform. So that's really, that's our vision, by the way. That's our vision, and this is the way we see how to compete to the GAFA, to create same kind of smart product.
Thank you. Inspiring. Thank you. Any other point? I don't know how long we still have, Nicolas or Ashwin. I don't know.
I think we are nearly towards the end, right? We don't want to keep the meeting so long, but if there are any few thoughts for 5 to 10 minutes, we can still add them. They're not overly long. Well, if there is no other questions to be addressed, I think you have addressed all the questions in chat box, Eva. So that's
yeah. All the questions have been answered.
Perfect. Well, there are no other questions. I would like again to thank our speakers and to thank you also, Yves, to act as a panelist, and to thank, of course, the organizing team, especially Roxanne, who is behind the scene. And with these words, I will leave you in the hands of Nicolas, who will close up and give you a bit more hints to entice your appetite for our next meetup, which is happening very soon. Thank you. The floor is yours, Nicolas.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. Thank you, Gérard, Daniël, and Frédéric for your presentation. I just wanted, and Yves, of course, for your support, mentioning, of course, that this is also possible with the support of Micropole, our sponsor. So the next dates, as you can see, before we have our next meetup next year, we already have next week our roundtable on a topic which actually follows the last meetup we had in September, about smart cities and how data scientists can actually bring and add value to the development of smart cities. This will be a roundtable, a virtual roundtable. Actually, we will have Quentin, the co-founder of Datavillage. Quentin is also here tonight, and thank you, Quentin. We'll have Xavier Girard from Ingestic, which is he's responsible for smart cities at Ingestic. We'll have Antoine Hublet from Digital Wallonia, being also there. Nicolas Installé from Futurosité. Ashwin will be also there with this academic eye on data science, and so this will be a round table, and it's free, and I invite you to register if you're interested. Also to say that our next meetup date is the 27th of Jan. We still are looking for some topics, so if you're interested or if you want to share experience, a specific case, feel free to and if you are not available on the 27th, please share it anyway, because there will be other dates in 2021, and we hope that it will be a much better year. It would be difficult actually to be worse than 2020, and we hope that, of course, even if technology works very well, we hope, of course, that we will be able to meet again physically, right? So that would be very, very nice, of course. Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for your participation. Thanks to our different speakers. Thanks, Yves. Thank you, Ashwin, and indeed, thank you, Roxanne, for all the good work in setting all this up. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.